I've always been the adventurous type, drawn to the thrill of the unknown. There's something exhilarating about immersing myself in nature, far from the noise and chaos of daily life. My friends often joke that I have a knack for finding trouble, but I prefer to think of it as a gift for exploration. This camping trip, however, would turn out to be more than just an escape into the wilderness. It would become a journey into the depths of fear itself. It was a Friday evening when my best friend, Jake, and I set off for the forest. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden hue over everything, but I felt a chill in the air that hinted at the mysteries hidden within the trees. We packed our gear into the back of my old SUV, excitement bubbling between us as we drove deeper into the woods, the gravel crunching under our tires. "Just imagine the stories we'll have to tell," I said, glancing at Jake, who was scrolling through his phone, trying to find a good playlist for our road trip. "Yeah, hopefully nothing too scary," he replied with a smirk, tossing his phone aside. "I'm not keen on ghost stories when we're out in the middle of nowhere." I chuckled, but deep down, I felt a strange thrill at the idea. Ghost stories were part of the charm of camping, after all. The forest had a history. Legends of lost souls and hidden secrets whispered among the trees. As we parked at the campsite, surrounded by towering pines, I felt a rush of anticipation. The air was crisp and filled with the earthy scent of damp leaves and moss. We unloaded our gear, setting up the tent and arranging the fire pit. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the shadows of the trees stretched ominously, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. "Let's explore a bit before it gets too dark," I suggested, my adventurous spirit kicking in. Jake hesitated but eventually agreed, following me down a narrow path that wound deeper into the woods. As we ventured further, the sounds of the forest enveloped us, leaves rustling, the distant hoot of an owl, and the faint trickle of a nearby stream. It was beautiful and serene, but there was an underlying tension, a whisper of something lurking just beyond our sight. "Hey, look over there!" I exclaimed, pointing to a dilapidated shack hidden among the trees, its weathered wood blending into the surroundings. Curiosity sparked within me, and I felt an irresistible urge to investigate. "What do you think that is?" Jake asked, eyeing the structure warily. "Only one way to find out," I replied with a grin, leading the way toward the shack, unaware of the dark secrets that awaited us inside. The shack loomed before us, a ghost of its former self. The paint had long since peeled away, revealing the raw wood beneath, and the door hung precariously on its hinges. As we approached, the air grew thick with anticipation, tinged with the scent of decay and damp earth. I could feel my heart racing in my chest, a mix of excitement and trepidation coursing through me. "Are you sure we should be doing this?" Jake asked, his voice tinged with hesitation as he peered into the darkened interior. "It looks like it could collapse any second. Come on, where's your sense of adventure?" I teased, pushing the door open with a creak that echoed in the silence. The inside was dimly lit by the fading light filtering through the cracked windows, casting eerie shadows across the floor. We stepped inside cautiously, the floorboards groaning under our weight. Dust danced in the air, illuminated by the last rays of sunlight, creating a ghostly atmosphere. Old furniture lay strewn about, covered in a thick layer of dust, remnants of a life long forgotten. My eyes were drawn to the far corner, where a rickety table stood, its surface cluttered with a few scattered items. "Look at this!" I exclaimed, bending down to examine a dusty, leather-bound diary that lay half-hidden beneath a broken chair. I felt a thrill of excitement wash over me as I picked it up, brushing off the grime to reveal the intricate designs embossed on the cover. "What do you think it is?" Jake asked, peering over my shoulder as I opened the diary. The pages were yellowed and brittle, filled with hasty scrawls and frantic handwriting. My heart raced as I began to read. As I flipped through the pages, I stumbled upon entries detailing strange occurrences in the forest. Stories of people who had gone missing, lost to the whispers that echoed among the trees. The words painted a chilling picture of fear and despair, detailing encounters with shadows and voices calling from the depths of the woods. "Dude, this is creepy," Jake murmured, glancing around the shack as if expecting the stories to come to life. "Are you sure we should be reading this?" "It's just a story," I replied, though a knot of unease tightened in my stomach. "Besides, it's fascinating. Look at this part," I read aloud, recounting a particularly eerie entry about a group of campers who had heard whispers in the night, urging them deeper into the forest. As I spoke, the atmosphere shifted. The temperature seemed to drop, and an unsettling feeling settled over us. The whispers from the diary echoed in my mind, intertwining with the ambient sounds of the forest outside. "Maybe we should leave," Jake suggested, his voice barely above a whisper, anxiety creeping into his tone. "Not yet," I insisted, feeling the pull of the diary's stories. "We have to see where this goes. This could be the start of something amazing." Against Jake's better judgment, I continued to read, losing myself in the chilling tales of the lost and the echoes that haunted the forest. Each entry drew me in further, and the growing sense of dread began to intertwine with excitement. Little did we know, we were awakening something that had long been buried, and the forest was ready to reveal its secrets. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the forest around us transformed into a world of shadows and whispers. The dying light painted the trees in shades of gray, their gnarled branches stretching like skeletal fingers toward the darkening sky. I could feel the thrill of exploration coursing through my veins, but there was also an undeniable tension in the air, a weight that seemed to press down on us as we lingered in the shack. "Maybe we should head back to the campsite," Jake suggested, glancing nervously at the door as the wind rustled through the trees outside. "It's getting dark, and I don't want to get lost out here." I hesitated, torn between the excitement of the diary's stories and the growing sense of foreboding. "Just a little longer," I urged, unable to shake the feeling that we were on the brink of something extraordinary. "Let's read a few more entries. I want to know what happened to these people." As I flipped through the pages, the whispers from the diary lingered in my mind, mingling with the sounds of the forest. And then I heard it, a faint, indistinguishable whisper that seemed to drift through the air like smoke. My heart raced as I strained to listen, and I looked at Jake, who was still peering uneasily out of the shack. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Hear what?" he replied, his brow furrowed in confusion. "The whispers," I insisted, the adrenaline coursing through me. "It's just like what the diary said." Jake shook his head, his face pale. "You're imagining things. Let's just go back." But as I focused on the sounds around us, the whispers grew clearer, like a distant chant carried on the wind. I felt an electric thrill shoot through me, and despite Jake's protests, I stepped outside, compelled to follow the sound. The forest enveloped us, the darkness deepening with each step. The whispers beckoned, calling me deeper into the woods, urging me to listen to their secrets. "This way," I said, turning in the direction of the sounds, my heart pounding in my chest. "Tom, wait," Jake called after me, his voice laced with fear. "This is a bad idea." Ignoring him, I pushed forward, drawn to the whispers like a moth to a flame. Each step felt surreal, the forest around us alive with an energy that pulsed through the air. The leaves rustled, and the branches swayed, creating a symphony of sounds that seemed to echo the whispers in my mind. As we ventured further, the whispers became more insistent, swirling around us, a chorus of voices entwined in a haunting melody. "Help us! Help us!" they called, the words intertwining with the shadows that danced in the moonlight. Jake's apprehension grew with each passing moment, his unease palpable. "We need to go back now," he insisted, panic rising in his voice. "This isn't right, Tom." I paused, torn between my fascination with the whispers and Jake's desperate plea. I could feel the weight of his fear pressing against me, but the whispers promised something more, an understanding of the forest's mysteries, a connection to those who had been lost. Just a little further, I urged, my voice steady as I turned back to him. I need to know what they want. Before he could respond, the wind picked up, and the whispers erupted into a cacophony of sound, wrapping around us like a shroud. I felt a chill run down my spine as shadows shifted at the edges of my vision, and I realized that the forest was alive with the echoes of the past. "Tom, please," Jake pleaded, his voice trembling. "I don't want to be here anymore." The tension between us reached a breaking point, but I couldn't turn back. The whispers were calling, and I was determined to discover their secrets, no matter the cost. The whispers surged around us like a tempest, and I could feel Jake's panic radiating off him in waves. "Tom, we really need to get out of here," he urged, his eyes darting nervously between the trees. But I was entranced, caught in the spell of the forest and the haunting voices that seemed to weave through the air, calling my name. "Just a bit further," I insisted, stepping deeper into the shadows. "I can almost understand them." As I moved forward, the atmosphere shifted, thickening with an unnameable dread. The once familiar forest felt like a labyrinth, the trees looming closer, their gnarled branches reaching out as if to ensnare us. The whispers ebbed and flowed, sometimes clear enough to make out words, but often slipping back into unintelligible murmurs that gnawed at my sanity. "Tom," Jake's voice cut through my focus. "This isn't normal. You have to listen to me." His voice trembled with fear, pulling me back to reality, but the pull of the whispers was intoxicating. Ignoring his pleas, I pressed on, captivated by the shadows that danced just beyond the edge of my vision. "We're close," I murmured, almost to myself. "I can feel it." The forest was alive, each rustle and whisper weaving a tapestry of mystery and fear. I could sense the weight of something watching us, lurking just out of sight, amplifying the tension between us. But my curiosity pushed me onward, an insatiable hunger to uncover the truth. With each step, the shadows deepened, and I felt a chill that crept into my bones. Jake lagged behind, and I turned to see him staring wide-eyed at the darkened path behind us, his expression a mix of dread and disbelief. "I don't like this, Tom. I really don't." "Just a little longer," I insisted, my heart racing. "I promise, we'll figure it out." But as the night deepened, so did the whispers. They became more urgent, rising and falling like the breath of the forest itself. "Help us! Help us!" they echoed, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being drawn into something we couldn't fully comprehend. Suddenly, the sound of snapping twigs pierced the silence, and I froze, adrenaline surging through my veins. I turned to Jake, who looked pale and terrified. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, heart racing. He nodded, his voice barely audible. "We're not alone, Tom. We should go." Before I could respond, I heard it again, a rustling in the underbrush, followed by soft, whispering laughter that sent chills down my spine. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end, and for the first time, a wave of genuine fear washed over me. "Maybe we should head back," I said, my voice shaky. The whispers were growing louder, more chaotic, and the air felt charged with an unseen energy. As if in response, the whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar, drowning out our thoughts. Join us, they called, and I felt an overwhelming urge to obey, to succumb to the darkness that beckoned from the depths of the forest. "Tom, please." Jake's voice broke through the chaos. "I can't take this anymore. Let's go." His fear was contagious, and I felt my resolve beginning to waver. But something deep inside me, an insatiable curiosity, urged me to push forward, to uncover the truth behind the whispers. "We can't just leave," I said, forcing the words out as I turned back toward the darkened path. "We need to find out what's going on." With that, I took a step deeper into the shadows, my heart pounding as the whispers intensified, echoing my name with a haunting familiarity. It was a choice that would lead us further into the heart of the mystery, and I wasn't sure if we would be able to find our way back. The forest closed in around us, the shadows thickening as I stepped further into the dark embrace of the trees. The whispers escalated, wrapping around me like a fog, their urgency clawing at my mind. "Join us," they called again, a chilling refrain that echoed off the trunks of the ancient trees. I felt their weight pressing down on my shoulders, drawing me deeper into their grasp. Jake, still lingering at the edge of the path, shot me a desperate look. "Tom, this isn't right," he shouted, his voice a mix of fear and frustration. "We need to get out of here before it's too late." I hesitated, the conflict within me raging. Part of me wanted to heed his warning and turn back, but the other part, the part enthralled by the mystery of the whispers, urged me to stay. "Just a little longer," I called back, my heart racing. "I need to understand what they want." As I moved forward, the rustling in the underbrush became more pronounced, and I felt the weight of eyes upon me, watching from the darkness. The further I went, the more the atmosphere shifted, thickening with an oppressive energy that made it hard to breathe. Then suddenly, the whispers turned into a clear voice, soft, pleading, yet tinged with despair. "Help us! Help us!" The sound reverberated through the trees, wrapping around me like a vine. I could almost see the figure of a lost soul flickering just beyond my vision, a shape that danced in the periphery of my mind. "Tom!" Jake's voice was frantic now, breaking my reverie. "Please, let's go." I turned to face him, a sense of dread settling in my stomach. What if these voices are from the people who went missing? What if they're trying to warn us? I struggled to explain my thoughts, my fascination pulling me deeper into the unknown. But what if they're not? Jake shot back, his voice rising in desperation. What if they're trying to lure us in? We don't know what we're dealing with. His words struck a chord, and a wave of uncertainty crashed over me. The forest felt alive with whispers, shadows flickering at the corners of my vision, and I could sense the tension building between us. Just then, a chilling gust of wind swept through the trees, carrying with it an echoing laughter that sent shivers down my spine. I felt the ground beneath my feet tremble, as if the very earth were trying to warn us of the danger ahead. "Maybe we should leave," I finally admitted, doubt creeping into my mind. "This doesn't feel right." Before I could turn back, a rustling sound broke the tension, and I froze. My heart pounded in my chest as I squinted into the darkness, trying to see what lurked beyond the trees. The whispers rose to a fever pitch, drowning out my thoughts. "Help us!" they cried again, louder and more insistent. "Tom, let's go," Jake urged, grabbing my arm with a fierce grip. In that moment, I felt the pull of the whispers deepen, an intoxicating call that resonated in my bones. It was as if the forest itself was alive, weaving a web of secrets and inviting us to uncover them. The fear was overwhelming, yet I couldn't shake the curiosity that burned within me. "Wait," I said, wrenching my arm free from Jake's grasp. "What if there's something we need to find? What if we can help them?" Jake stared at me, fear etched on his face. "You don't know what you're asking. This isn't some adventure. These are real people, and we don't know what happened to them." But even as he spoke, I felt a compulsion to continue forward. I took a step deeper into the forest, the whispers wrapping around me like a shroud. It was a dangerous choice, but curiosity had a way of blinding me to the potential horrors that lay ahead. As I ventured further, Jake's protests faded into the background, swallowed by the whispers that beckoned me onward. I had to know what awaited us in the depths of the forest, even if it meant confronting the darkness within. With each step I took deeper into the forest, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The once inviting woods became a twisted maze of shadows, and the whispers intensified, drowning out any remnants of rational thought. I could feel the weight of their presence pressing down on me, an overwhelming sensation that we were being drawn into something we could hardly comprehend. "Tom, please." Jake's voice echoed in the distance, his desperation tugging at the edges of my consciousness. But the further I moved, the more entranced I became by the whispers, the way they wove through the trees like a living thread, pulling me closer to the heart of their mystery. Suddenly, a flash of movement caught my eye. I turned to see a figure flickering at the edge of the path, a silhouette barely visible among the trees. My heart raced as I stepped closer, drawn by an inexplicable urge. The whispers surged around me, forming a chaotic symphony that echoed in my ears, urging me forward. Join us, Tom." Jake's voice rang out again, louder now, tinged with panic. "Get back here." But I couldn't turn away. I felt an overwhelming need to understand what lay ahead, to uncover the truth behind the whispers that had haunted the forest for so long. "I have to see," I shouted back, my voice barely audible over the rising chorus. As I approached the flickering figure, the shadows thickened around me, and I felt an icy chill creep into my bones. The whispers coalesced into a singular voice, rising above the others, clear and haunting. "Help us!" In that moment, the world around me seemed to dissolve, leaving only the figure and the haunting sound of its voice. It was a woman, her face obscured by shadow, but I could feel her sorrow resonating through the air. She reached out a hand, beckoning me closer. "Help us!" she repeated, her voice a fragile whisper that pulled at my heart. "Find us. Remember us." I hesitated, my heart pounding as I stood at the precipice of the unknown. Was this a spirit of one of the missing souls, trapped in the forest? Or was it a trick of the mind, a manifestation of my own fears? The tension in the air crackled like electricity, and I felt the weight of countless eyes upon me. "Tom." Jake's voice broke through again, his urgency snapping me back to reality. "We need to get out of here now." But the pull of the woman's voice was irresistible. I took a step closer, heart racing as I reached out my hand. "What do you want? How can I help you?" I asked, desperation creeping into my tone. "Remember," she urged, her voice fading into the whispers that surrounded us. "Help us find peace." Suddenly, the shadows shifted, and the figure dissipated into the darkness, leaving me standing alone, surrounded by a cacophony of whispers. The energy in the air thickened, and I felt a chill run down my spine as the whispers swelled into a deafening roar. "Tom, please," Jake shouted again, his voice frantic. "This isn't safe. We need to leave." In that moment, the reality of our situation crashed down on me. I had crossed a threshold, and now I was standing at the edge of a precipice, teetering between the world of the living and the lost. I turned to see Jake, his face pale with fear, and I felt a pang of guilt for dragging him into this. "Maybe we should go," I finally admitted, my voice trembling. "I don't know what's happening here, but it feels like we're not welcome." But as I turned to leave, the whispers reached a fever pitch, and the wind howled around us, pushing against my back as if urging me to stay. I could feel the weight of the souls that had vanished into the forest, their pain echoing through the night. "Join us. Help us," they cried, pulling me back toward the darkness. "Tom," Jake cried out, grabbing my arm. "Don't let it take you." I looked into his eyes, and in that moment, I realized the truth. We were standing at a crossroads, and the choices we made from here on out would determine not just our fate, but the fate of those lost in the whispers of the woods. The urgency of Jake's grip on my arm jolted me back to reality, but the whispers continued to swirl around us, amplifying in intensity. I could feel the forest pulsing with energy, its very essence alive with the echoes of those who had disappeared. It was as if the trees themselves were conspiring against us, drawing us deeper into their dark embrace. "Tom, we have to go now," Jake urged, his eyes wide with fear. "This isn't just some story. There's something wrong here." I hesitated, torn between the desire to confront the whispers and the growing realization that we were standing on the precipice of something far more dangerous than I had imagined. But what if we can help them, Jake? What if these voices are trying to tell us something important? My heart raced as I struggled to find the words. The only thing they're telling us is to get out, he shot back, his voice tinged with desperation. We don't know what they want. We're not equipped to deal with this. The wind howled around us, the branches creaking ominously overhead. For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of doubt. Perhaps Jake was right. Perhaps we had stumbled into something we didn't understand. But as I turned to face the dark expanse of the forest, the whispers crescendoed, merging into a haunting melody that seemed to wrap around my heart. Help us, remember us, they cried, their voices rising to a fever pitch. The urgency in their tone felt palpable, like a pulse that reverberated through the ground beneath my feet. Suddenly, the shadows in the forest began to shift, twisting and contorting as if alive. My breath caught in my throat as I witnessed dark shapes moving among the trees, flickering in and out of existence. Panic surged through me, but the whispers urged me forward, pulling me toward the heart of the darkness. Tom, please, Jake pleaded, his grip tightening as he pulled me back. We can't stay here. It's dangerous. The fear in his eyes matched the terror clawing at my insides, and I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. I had led us into this nightmare, and now it felt as if we were trapped in a web woven by the very souls we sought to understand. Let's go, I said finally, my voice trembling as I turned to face Jake. You're right. We need to leave. But as we turned to make our way back, the forest erupted with an otherworldly howl, a sound so piercing it sent chills down my spine. The shadows around us grew darker, swirling like a storm, and I felt an overwhelming force pulling us back into the depths of the woods. No, I shouted, my heart racing. We have to push through. With one last look at Jake, whose face was pale with fear, I steeled myself and began to run deeper into the forest, the whispers growing louder and more frantic. Help us! Join us! They cried, weaving through my mind like an unbreakable chain. As I sprinted through the trees, I could feel the weight of the forest closing in around me, a pressure that felt suffocating. Jake called after me, his voice fading into the chaos, but I pressed on, compelled to uncover the truth behind the whispers. Suddenly, I tripped over a root, falling to the ground with a thud. Pain shot through my leg, but I pushed myself up, determined not to be stopped. The whispers swelled, filling my mind with a cacophony of voices pleading for help. Remember us, they wailed, echoing in my ears like a desperate chant. I stumbled forward, my heart pounding as the darkness pressed closer. The shadows around me felt like hands reaching out, trying to pull me into their depths. I could sense Jake's fear mingling with my own, but I couldn't turn back now. In the distance, I saw a flicker of light, a small ethereal glow that beckoned me. This way, I thought, driven by the instinct to follow the light, to find out what lay at its source. But just as I took a step toward it, the ground trembled again, and a deep rumbling sound echoed from the depths of the forest. The whispers rose to a fever pitch, drowning out my thoughts. Help us! Help us! They cried, and I realized with a jolt that I was standing at the edge of something ancient and powerful, a threshold that could not be crossed without consequences. The ethereal glow in the distance pulsed like a heartbeat, pulling me closer as I wrestled with the overwhelming chaos around me. The whispers transformed into a chorus of pleading voices, each one echoing the desperation of souls lost to the forest. Help us, remember us, they cried, resonating deep within my core. I could feel the weight of their sorrow, a burden I had never anticipated. I turned to see Jake, his face a mix of fear and determination. Tom, we can't keep going like this. We need to find a way out. His voice was strained, echoing the dread that hung heavily in the air. But the allure of the light was too powerful, and I felt an unshakable compulsion to reach it. What if it's the answer? I called back, trying to drown out the rising panic in my heart. What if that's how we can help them? Tom. Jake shouted, fear and urgency in his voice. "This isn't a game. We're not equipped to handle whatever is happening here." I hesitated, torn between the beckoning glow and Jake's desperate pleas. I could sense the truth behind his words, the lurking danger that had crept into our lives since we found the diary. But the whispers urged me on, promising resolution and understanding. With a deep breath, I took a step toward the light, forcing myself to focus on the warmth it radiated. The shadows around us twisted ominously, and the ground trembled beneath my feet, as if the very essence of the forest was warning me to turn back. "Help us!" the voices surged, rising to a fever pitch that resonated through my bones. I felt the urgency in their cries, a longing for closure that transcended the veil of death. The moment I stepped closer, the whispers transformed into a cohesive plea, a single voice that broke through the chaos. "Free us. Help us find peace." I glanced back at Jake, who was rooted in place, his eyes wide with fear. "Tom, don't," he begged, but I couldn't turn away. The light felt like a promise, a chance to uncover the truth. "Stay close," I shouted back, feeling a surge of determination. I reached out toward the glow, the whispers intertwining with my thoughts as they urged me to remember. Suddenly, the ground beneath me shook violently, and I stumbled as the air filled with a chilling wind. The light flickered, revealing glimpses of faces twisted in agony, souls trapped in a loop of despair. I felt the weight of their stories pressing down on me, a rush of sorrow that threatened to consume me. "Join us," the voices echoed, pulling me deeper into their web. "Tom," Jake shouted, his voice strained with panic. "You have to come back." But the glow was blinding now, and I couldn't resist its call. I was drawn into the light, feeling the warmth envelop me like a comforting embrace. The whispers transformed into a chorus of names, stories flooding my mind, stories of love, loss, and longing. As I stood there, suspended between light and shadow, I realized the truth. The souls were trapped not just by the forest, but by their own unfulfilled desires. They needed someone to remember them, to acknowledge their pain, to help them break the cycle of despair that bound them to this place. "Let me help you," I cried out, my voice echoing in the stillness. "I will remember your stories." In that moment, the light intensified, bathing me in a golden glow that felt both terrifying and comforting. The whispers turned into a symphony, a celebration of the lives that had once been vibrant and full of hope. But just as I began to feel the connection solidify, the ground shook violently again, and the darkness surged around me, threatening to pull me back into the shadows. The glow flickered, and I could feel the anguish of the souls rising in response to the chaos. "Tom," Jake's voice cut through the turmoil. "You have to fight it. We need to go." Desperation clawed at me as I struggled to maintain my focus. I felt the spirit's energy intertwining with my own, a powerful force that surged within me. "I won't leave you," I shouted into the abyss, feeling the gravity of their stories pressing down on my heart. The moment hung suspended, teetering between light and shadow, as I realized the choice before me: to embrace the truth and help the lost souls find peace, or to flee back to safety, leaving them behind to linger in the darkness. The glow around me pulsed with an intensity that felt almost alive, illuminating the faces of the lost souls hovering at the edge of my consciousness. Their expressions were a mix of hope and despair, and I could sense their longing for release. I felt the weight of their stories pressing down on me, and in that moment, I understood the depth of their suffering. "Help us find peace," the voices whispered, weaving through the fabric of my thoughts. "Remember us." I stood at the crossroads of fear and courage, the choices laid bare before me. Jake's frantic calls faded into the background as I focused on the spirits surrounding me, their need palpable in the air. The forest had become a vessel of sorrow, each tree holding the weight of a lost life. "Let me help you," I shouted, my voice breaking through the chaos. "I will remember your stories. I will share your pain with the world." As I spoke, the light grew brighter, enveloping me in a warmth that pushed back the shadows. I could feel the spirits moving closer, their energy intertwining with mine, forming a bond that transcended the veil of death. I closed my eyes, focusing on the memories flooding my mind, the laughter of loved ones, the dreams unfulfilled, the voices that cried out for recognition. The darkness pulsed in response, and I felt the ground tremble beneath me. I opened my eyes to see the shadows swirling like a storm, but I held firm, drawing strength from the connection I felt with the souls around me. "You are not forgotten," I declared, my voice steady. "Your stories will be heard." With each word, I felt the energy of the spirits intensify, their whispers transforming into a unified voice. "Remember us. Free us," they echoed, merging into a beautiful chorus that resonated deep within my soul. The darkness around us began to dissipate, the shadows retreating as the light grew more radiant. I felt the warmth of the Spirit's gratitude wash over me, and in that moment, I knew we were breaking the cycle that had bound them to this forest for so long. But just as the glow reached its zenith, the ground shook violently again, and I stumbled, fighting to maintain my connection with the spirits. The wind howled through the trees, and I could feel the shadows clawing at the edges of my consciousness, desperate to reclaim what was lost. "Tom," Jake's voice pierced through the storm. "We have to go. Now." "Not yet," I shouted back, refusing to let fear take hold. "I won't abandon them." The spirits swirled around me, their energy intertwining with my own, and I could feel the weight of their stories pressing against my heart. I could sense their pain, their longing for release, and it fueled my resolve. "I will remember you," I cried out, my voice rising above the chaos. "I will tell your stories." In that moment, the whispers transformed into a harmonious melody, a celebration of life and loss. The glow around me intensified, illuminating the forest with a golden light that pushed back the shadows, revealing the beauty of the trees and the wildflowers beneath our feet. As the light enveloped me, I felt the spirits begin to fade, their presence still palpable but lightening with each passing moment. "Thank you," they whispered, their voices a gentle caress against my skin. "We are free." The darkness receded, the whispers turning into a gentle breeze that rustled the leaves above. I could feel the forest breathe a sigh of relief, the energy shifting from despair to peace. The spirits were finally at rest, and in that moment, I knew our connection had transcended the boundaries of life and death. As the last echoes of their voices faded into the night, I turned to find Jake standing a few feet away, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and relief. "You did it," he breathed, the fear that had consumed him now replaced with wonder. "You helped them." I nodded, feeling the weight of the experience settle over me like a comforting blanket. "We did it together," I said, my voice steady. "But we need to get out of here. It's not safe anymore." With the spirits released, I felt the forest shift around us. The energy that had once felt suffocating now transformed into something lighter, more welcoming. We made our way back through the trees, the path illuminated by the remnants of the glow that had surrounded us. As we stepped out of the woods, I looked back one last time, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. The forest was no longer a place of fear but a sanctuary for the lost souls, a testament to the stories that would now be remembered. "Let's go home," I said, a smile breaking through the weight of the night's events. And as we walked away from the forest, I carried with me the stories of those who had come before, vowing to honor their memory and share their truths with the world. As a lifelong nature enthusiast, I've always found solace in the great outdoors. There's something magical about the way the trees sway and the wind whispers secrets through their leaves. My friends and I often escape to the woods, seeking adventure and a break from the chaos of daily life. Camping trips have become a cherished ritual, a chance to bond over campfires and stories under the stars. Tonight, however, the air felt different as we set up our campsite deep within a secluded forest. With no moon to illuminate the path, darkness wrapped around us like a shroud, amplifying every sound. The crackle of the fire, the rustle of leaves, and the distant call of nocturnal creatures. As I hammered the tent stakes into the ground, an odd sensation crept over me. It was as if the forest was watching, its silence heavy with anticipation. After we settled in, my friend Jake and I gathered around the campfire, sharing jokes and memories to lighten the eerie atmosphere. But even as laughter echoed in the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Flickering lights danced between the trees, teasing my curiosity while also stirring an unsettling fear deep within me. Little did I know that this night would challenge everything I thought I understood about fear and the unknown. As the night deepened, the warmth of the campfire provided a temporary shield against the creeping cold and the uncertainty that lurked in the shadows. Jake and I shared stories, our voices mingling with the crackle of burning wood, but my gaze often wandered to the flickering lights that danced just beyond the tree-line. They glimmered like distant stars, teasing and beckoning, yet an unsettling feeling lodged in my chest. "Did you see that?" Jake suddenly asked, breaking my reverie. He pointed toward the darkened edge of the forest, where a particularly bright flash had just darted between the trees. My heart raced. "Yeah, I saw it," I replied, trying to sound casual. "Probably just some fireflies or something." But as we continued our conversation, the lights returned, growing brighter and more erratic. The once familiar sounds of the forest felt charged with tension. I could hear the distant echo of laughter, but it was strange and distorted, like a memory wrapped in shadows. My skin prickled as the sound washed over me, and I exchanged a wary glance with Jake. "Maybe we should check it out," he suggested, excitement dancing in his eyes. But beneath his bravado, I sensed a flicker of fear. I mean, it could just be some campers having a party or something. Or it could be something else entirely, I countered, my voice low. The night felt heavier now, as if the trees themselves were leaning in, eager to eavesdrop on our conversation. A choice lay before us: ignore the mystery and stay safe, or venture into the darkness to uncover the truth. My curiosity tugged at me, but the feeling of being watched loomed large. Driven by a mix of curiosity and unease, Jake and I decided to investigate the strange lights that seemed to flicker just beyond the safety of our campfire's glow. With a flashlight in hand, I led the way, the beam cutting through the dense darkness like a knife. Each step I took echoed in the stillness, the crunch of leaves beneath my boots amplifying the palpable tension in the air. As we moved deeper into the woods, the laughter faded but the whispers grew louder, swirling around us like a fog. They were indistinct, almost like a chant in a foreign language, and each syllable sent shivers down my spine. I glanced back at Jake, who was right on my heels, his expression a mix of excitement and anxiety. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated, momentarily doubting my decision. "We can turn back," I said, but something deep inside urged me to press on. "Let's just see what it is." The deeper we ventured, the more the forest seemed to close in around us. Shadows danced between the trees, and I felt a prickling sensation at the back of my neck, as if someone, or something, was watching our every move. I tried to shake it off, attributing it to the eerie ambience of the night, but it was hard to ignore the growing sense of dread. Suddenly, we stumbled into a small clearing where the lights flickered more intensely, illuminating the surrounding trees. The atmosphere shifted, thickening with an unnameable tension. It felt as if the very air was alive, heavy with anticipation. And then, amidst the flickering lights, I caught sight of something, a fleeting shadow darting between the trees. My heart raced as the whispers crescendoed, echoing a haunting melody that seemed to beckon us further into the darkness. In that small clearing, the lights swirled around us, casting strange shadows that flickered and danced as if mocking our presence. I felt Jake's grip tighten on my arm as the laughter returned, now clearer, resonating through the trees. It was a haunting sound, high-pitched and ethereal, sending chills racing down my spine. "What is that?" Jake whispered, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and fascination. I shook my head, unable to form a coherent response. The laughter seemed to echo from everywhere and nowhere all at once, wrapping around us like a shroud. My instinct was to retreat, but an unseen force held me in place, a curious compulsion that urged me to understand the source of this otherworldly sound. As we stood frozen, the whispers intensified, merging with the laughter into a chorus of disembodied voices. "Come closer, join us," they seemed to say, tantalizing and terrifying all at once. I glanced around, trying to locate the source, but the darkness concealed everything, leaving only the unsettling feeling of being watched. Suddenly, I felt a presence behind us. I turned sharply, heart racing, but saw nothing, just the inky blackness of the woods. The sensation of being pursued tightened around me, and I whispered, "Jake, we should go back." But Jake hesitated, peering into the shadows with a reckless curiosity. "What if there's something out there?" he said, his voice barely above a breath. "What if we're missing something incredible?" I could feel my stomach drop at the thought. We were teetering on the edge of something dangerous, caught in a web of our own curiosity. I tugged on his sleeve, urging him to reconsider. "We're not equipped for this," I insisted, my voice firm. "We need to leave now." The urgency in my voice seemed to break through Jake's daze, and he reluctantly nodded. But just as we turned to leave, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. A sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing, causing the lights to flicker wildly, and I felt a cold chill creep up my spine. It was as if the very forest was exhaling, and I was acutely aware of how vulnerable we were in this isolated expanse. As we stepped back toward the path we had come from, something in the shadows caught my eye. I hesitated, heart pounding, drawn by an instinct that told me to look. It was there, an indistinct figure lurking between the trees. It was a vague shape, almost human-like, but it shifted and shimmered, blurring the lines of reality. "Did you see that?" I breathed, gripping Jake's arm tightly. He turned to look, and for a brief moment, our eyes met in shared terror. The laughter had ceased, replaced by an eerie silence that hung heavy in the air. It felt as though the woods themselves were holding their breath. Suddenly, the figure stepped closer, revealing an outline that seemed to flicker like the lights we had seen. My heart raced as I realized that this wasn't just a trick of the light. It was something sentient, something aware of our presence. The entity appeared to thrive on our fear, and I could feel its gaze boring into me, sending waves of dread coursing through my body. "Run!" I shouted, breaking the spell of paralysis that had gripped us. We turned and bolted, adrenaline surging as we stumbled back through the underbrush. The forest became a labyrinth of shadows, every snap of a twig amplifying my fear. Behind us, the whispering resumed, now mixed with a sinister, mocking laughter that echoed through the trees, urging us to keep moving. The chase had begun, and I had no idea what lay ahead. As we raced through the darkness, the underbrush clawed at our legs, each step becoming a frantic dance with fear. The laughter followed us, ringing in my ears like a taunt, echoing through the trees as if the forest itself were alive and mocking our panic. I could feel Jake beside me, his breath coming in sharp gasps as we pushed deeper into the woods, desperately searching for safety. "Where do we go?" he shouted, his voice tinged with desperation. I glanced around, my mind racing to find a way out. Everything looked the same, twisted trees and shadows that seemed to blend into one another, creating an impenetrable maze. The entity's presence loomed behind us, a dark force that thrived on our fear, urging us to lose our way. In a moment of clarity, I remembered the direction we had come from, the path leading to our campsite. "This way!" I yelled, veering left, hoping the familiarity of our route would guide us back to safety. But with every step, the whispers grew louder, morphing into a cacophony of indistinct words that clawed at my sanity. They felt personal, as if the forest was reaching into my mind, probing my deepest fears. Just then, I heard a rustle behind us, a shift in the air that sent my heart racing. I dared to look back, And there it was. The figure, now closer than before, its shape more defined. A chilling realization struck me. This wasn't just a mindless entity. It was sentient, aware of us, playing a game of survival that we hadn't signed up for. "We can't keep running," I shouted, panic rising in my chest. "We have to confront it." The words felt heavy, but there was no turning back now. We needed to face whatever this was head-on. We stopped in a small clearing, my chest heaving as I fought to catch my breath. The darkness pressed in around us, and the whispers intensified, swirling like a tempest in my mind. I could feel Jake's eyes on me, searching for reassurance, but all I had was the weight of uncertainty. "Are we really going to confront it?" he asked, his voice shaking. I nodded, though my stomach twisted with doubt. "We have to. We can't let it control us." But as I stood there, the shadows danced around us, warping the trees into grotesque shapes. My grip tightened on my flashlight, its beam flickering ominously, casting erratic shadows that seemed to taunt us. I felt the ground shifting beneath my feet, the forest swirling in a dizzying kaleidoscope of fear. Then, the figure emerged again, this time more defined. It stood at the edge of the clearing, a dark silhouette with no discernible features, yet I could feel its gaze boring into me. The whispers transformed into a chorus of laughter, echoing in my mind, drowning out rational thought. "Mark!" Jake's voice trembled as he took a step back. I could see the fear reflected in his eyes, mirroring my own. The entity seemed to thrive on our terror, feeding off the doubt that clawed at our sanity. I had to act. "Jake, we need to stand together. Whatever this is, we can't let it divide us." The truth of our situation weighed heavily on my shoulders, but there was no turning back. We were trapped in a game of survival, and it was time to make a stand. With a surge of determination, I took a step forward, placing myself between Jake and the looming figure. "You don't scare us," I shouted, my voice cutting through the oppressive atmosphere. The entity hesitated, its form shifting in response to my challenge, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of power in my stance. Jake stood beside me, his fear transforming into defiance. "We're not afraid of you," he echoed, his voice gaining strength. The whispers escalated into a chaotic blend of voices, swirling around us, attempting to break our resolve. But as the entity loomed closer, I could feel the air thickening, the forest pressing in like a vice. I remembered the stories I had heard about fear and how it could manifest into something tangible, feeding off our insecurities and doubts. "We control our fear," I reminded Jake, my voice steadying. "It doesn't control us." I raised the flashlight, aiming its beam directly at the figure. The light pierced the darkness, and the entity recoiled as if burned. The whispers transformed into shrieks, and I felt the ground shake beneath us. "You're nothing but a shadow," I cried out, focusing all my energy on confronting it. In that moment, the shadows shifted, revealing glimpses of the forest beyond. It was time to reclaim our reality. Together, we took a step forward, determined to face whatever this entity represented, no longer mere victims but warriors fighting for our sanity. As the beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness, the entity shrieked and flinched, its form flickering like a dying flame. I could feel the power of our defiance surging between Jake and me, a force stronger than fear itself. The forest seemed to react, the shadows retreating as if acknowledging our resolve. "Keep pushing, Mark," Jake shouted, his voice fierce and unwavering. Together, we advanced, the laughter and whispers now turning to frantic pleas, echoing around us. The entity twisted and contorted, trying to regain its shape, but we pressed on, refusing to yield. Just as I thought we were gaining ground, the air thickened with a suffocating darkness, threatening to engulf us. The ground trembled beneath our feet, and I could feel the weight of despair clawing at my mind, trying to pull me back into the depths of fear. But we wouldn't let it win. "Run!" I yelled, turning toward the path we had taken earlier. We dashed back through the forest, branches scratching at our arms and legs, but we didn't stop. The laughter faded, replaced by the sound of our own breaths, frantic and heavy with adrenaline. We burst into the clearing where our campsite lay, the flickering campfire a beacon of safety against the encroaching darkness. The forest behind us felt alive, shifting and murmuring as if it were alive, but we had made it back. We collapsed to the ground, hearts racing, the weight of the night's terror beginning to lift. But as I glanced back into the woods, I knew that the encounter would leave scars deeper than the ones on our skin. As dawn broke over the horizon, the first light of day spilled into the clearing, chasing away the remnants of night's terror. Jake and I sat by the dying embers of the campfire, exhausted but relieved. The air felt different now, lighter, as if the forest had released its grip on our minds. But even with the warmth of the sun, a chill lingered in my bones, a reminder of the darkness we had faced. "What the hell just happened?" Jake asked, breaking the silence, his voice hoarse but steady. I turned to him, my thoughts racing. "I think we encountered something that feeds on fear, something that thrives on our doubts." He nodded, staring into the fire as if it could cleanse the horrors of the night. "I didn't think we'd make it back." "Neither did I admitted, feeling the weight of our ordeal settle on my shoulders. "But we did. And I think it taught us something important. We had faced our fears, confronted the unknown, and emerged on the other side, albeit forever changed. The experience left an indelible mark on both of us, a bond forged in the crucible of survival. As we packed our gear and prepared to leave the campsite, I glanced back at the forest, its secrets still hidden beneath the foliage. I knew we would carry the memories of that night with us. Lessons about courage, trust, and the thin veil that separates reality from our deepest fears. With one last look, we turned away from the haunting woods, ready to face whatever awaited us beyond their shadow. Growing up, I was always drawn to the thrill of adventure. Whether it was exploring the woods behind my childhood home or spending weekends camping with friends, the great outdoors felt like an endless playground. However, nothing prepared me for the eerie tales that surrounded the secluded forest I found myself in now. It was supposed to be just another camping trip with my best friend, Ben. Someone who grounded my wild ideas with a dose of caution. As we drove deeper into the forest, I could feel the excitement bubbling within me, overshadowed only by the whispers of local legends that filled my mind. This place was known for its dark history, where ancient rituals and ghostly tales lingered in the air, almost palpable among the towering trees. The sun was setting, casting long shadows that danced across the ground as we set up our camp. I glanced at Ben, who was already unfolding the tent with a frown etched across his face. He had always been the practical one, reminding me to pack extra layers and keep an eye on the weather. "You really think it's safe to camp out here?" he asked, eyeing the dense foliage surrounding us. "It's just a forest, Ben," I replied, brushing off his concern. "Besides, it'll be fun. Just us and the great outdoors." With a tent pitched and a fire crackling to life, we settled into our chairs, the warmth of the flames contrasting with the cool evening air. The flickering light created an inviting atmosphere, but as the shadows grew longer, the forest around us seemed to hold its breath, as if anticipating something. Little did I know, this would be a night that would challenge our friendship and test our courage in ways we could never have imagined. As we sat around the campfire, the crackling of the flames was the only sound breaking the heavy silence of the forest. The sun had fully set, and darkness enveloped us like a thick blanket, punctuated only by the glow of the fire. Ben's expression was still cautious, a stark contrast to my bubbling excitement. "Let's make the most of it," I said, eager to lift his spirits. "Tell me some ghost stories." "You know you want to." Ben rolled his eyes but eventually grinned. "Fine, but I'm not responsible for any nightmares you have tonight." I leaned in closer, the warmth of the fire chasing away the chill in the air. Ben began recounting tales he'd heard growing up, stories of lost souls wandering the forest, drawn in by the echoes of ancient rituals performed by those who once called this place home. He spoke of a spirit known as the Whispering Woman, said to lure unsuspecting campers into the depths of the woods with her haunting voice. Legend has it, Ben continued, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, that if you hear her cry, it means you're already marked. I felt a thrill run down my spine, half excited, half nervous. Come on, that's just a story to scare kids. I laughed, trying to dismiss the unsettling feeling creeping in. What's a little ghost story among friends? But as we exchanged tales, the atmosphere shifted. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it a low, distant sound that almost resembled a cry. I glanced at Ben, who had fallen silent, his face pale under the firelight. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's probably just an animal," he replied, though I could hear the uncertainty in his tone. The sound came again, this time clearer, more anguished. It echoed through the trees, sending a shiver down my spine. My heart raced as I exchanged glances with Ben, our bravado crumbling in the face of something that felt all too real. "We should probably just ignore it," I suggested, attempting to mask my own rising fear. "Maybe it's just the wind playing tricks." Ben shook his head, his eyes wide. "You can't just ignore a scream like that. What if someone's in trouble?" As the fire flickered wildly, casting erratic shadows around us, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The tales of the forest suddenly felt all too close, and I realized we might not be alone in the dark after all. After Ben's last story, a heavy silence fell over our campsite, thickening the air with an almost tangible tension. I stared into the flames, watching the fire dance, but my mind was elsewhere, caught in the eerie echo of the cries that lingered in my ears. Each crackle of the wood seemed to amplify my unease. "Maybe we should check it out," I suggested, trying to sound braver than I felt. "It could be someone lost or hurt." Ben shot me a disbelieving look. "You really want to wander into the woods in the middle of the night? What if it's just a prank? Or a genuine emergency?" I countered, my curiosity getting the better of me. "We can't just sit here while someone might need help." Reluctantly, Ben nodded. "Okay, but we stick together. No wandering off." Armed with our flashlights, we stepped away from the flickering light of the campfire. The forest loomed around us, dark and oppressive, the trees seeming to close in as we moved deeper into the shadows. Every rustle of leaves sent my heart racing, and I could feel Ben's anxiety mirrored in the tension of his grip on the flashlight. "Do you really think it was a person?" he whispered, glancing around nervously. "Maybe," I replied, though a part of me wasn't so sure. The forest felt alive, its presence heavy with secrets and stories long forgotten. As we ventured further, the cries grew louder, echoing off the trees, twisting through the darkness like ghostly whispers. "Can you hear that?" Ben asked, his voice trembling. I nodded, straining to listen. The sound was no longer just a cry. It morphed into a low, mournful wail, intertwined with the rustling of the leaves. It was as if the forest itself was lamenting. "Let's go back," Ben said suddenly, his fear palpable. "This isn't right." Before I could respond, the flashlight beam flickered, casting fleeting shadows that danced at the edges of my vision. I swung the light around, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw a figure flitting between the trees. My breath caught in my throat. "Did you see that?" I gasped, pointing into the darkness. "What?" Ben squinted into the void, his body tense. "What did you see?" I don't know," I stammered, feeling the urge to turn and run. "It was just something." "We need to get back to the fire," he insisted, backing away slowly. As we turned to retrace our steps, the wailing intensified, now echoing with a haunting familiarity. I could feel it deep within me, a resonance that seemed to claw at my sanity. The woods were no longer just a backdrop. They were alive, and whatever was out there was watching us, waiting. With our hearts pounding, we rushed back toward the flickering glow of the campfire, the eerie cries echoing behind us like a relentless shadow. The darkness felt heavier now, pressing down on us, and each crack of a branch sent us jumping. I could sense Ben's unease growing, and I fought to keep my own fear at bay. When we finally reached the clearing, the fire blazed defiantly against the dark, its flames twisting and turning as if it too were alive. We sank into our chairs, the warmth providing a brief sense of safety, but the feeling was fleeting. The whispers from the woods crept back, intertwining with the flicker of the flames, causing them to dance erratically. "Did you notice how the fire behaves?" Ben asked, his voice shaky. "It's almost like it's responding to something." I watched the flames flicker and sway, almost as if they were trying to communicate. "You're right. It's like it's alive or something," I replied, trying to dismiss the chill that crept up my spine. The night felt suffocating as the cries resumed, this time louder and more desperate, resonating through the trees. "What if those sounds are the souls of people who got lost in here?" I suggested, the thought sending a shiver down my back. Ben shook his head. "We're just letting our imaginations run wild. There has to be a rational explanation." But even as he said this, I could see the doubt in his eyes. We exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of the night settling heavily on our shoulders. Shadows danced around us, elongating with every flicker of the fire, their shapes twisting into forms that felt almost human. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the direction of the trees, causing us both to jump to our feet. "What was that?" Ben whispered, his voice barely audible. "I don't know," I said, my heart racing. "Let's just stay close to the fire." As if responding to our fear, the flames surged higher, casting grotesque shadows across the ground. The shadows appeared to take on life, swirling and darting just beyond the perimeter of the light, drawing closer as we stood frozen in place. "Maybe we should call out," I suggested, desperation creeping into my voice. "If someone is out there, we should let them know we're here." Ben looked at me, fear etched on his face. "Or maybe we shouldn't attract any more attention," he countered. But before I could respond, the fire suddenly sputtered, smoke rising and obscuring our view of the trees. The whispers intensified, overlapping until they became a chorus of cries, laced with agony and despair. "We need to leave," Ben urged, his eyes wide with panic. I hesitated, torn between the fear of the unknown and the need to uncover the truth behind the cries. "But what if we're meant to help?" I pressed. "What if it's real?" The tension between us felt insurmountable as the flames danced erratically, the shadows closing in. I realized in that moment that fear had taken root in our hearts, and the forest was eager to exploit it. "Whatever's out there, it's not welcoming," Ben insisted, backing away from the fire. "Let's go now." Before I could answer, the fire flickered one last time, plunging us into darkness. With the campfire extinguished, the darkness enveloped us completely, leaving only the faint glow of our flashlights to cut through the inky blackness. Ben and I stood frozen, our breaths coming out in shaky puffs as we exchanged panicked glances. The whispers had receded but not disappeared. They lingered, a haunting reminder that something was still out there, watching us. "What now?" Ben whispered, his voice barely audible. "Do we just stand here?" I could feel the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me. "We have to decide. Do we leave or find out what's happening?" My curiosity gnawed at me, but I could sense Ben's growing fear. "Are you serious?" he shot back, his eyes wide. "What if we find something we don't want to see?" "I think we should go now." The tension between us crackled like the remnants of the fire, and for a moment, I hesitated. The urge to explore the darkness was strong, yet I felt the gravity of Ben's fear pulling me back. What if we miss an opportunity to help someone? I asked, searching for a way to bridge the gap between us. Help, he exclaimed, his voice rising. You really think there's someone in this forest who needs our help? Look around. This place is, before he could finish, a piercing scream echoed through the trees, more visceral than the cries we had heard before. It seemed to reverberate in my bones, cutting through my thoughts like a knife. Okay, that's it, Ben shouted, turning to grab his backpack. I'm not staying here any longer. I'm leaving. Wait. I reached out to stop him, panic rising in my chest. We can't just split up. That's the worst thing we could do. But he was already moving, urgency fueling his steps. Then come with me. As we turned to head back toward the trail, the whispers returned, growing louder, swirling around us like a chilling wind. Shadows darted at the edges of our flashlights, blurring the lines between reality and our frayed imaginations. Are you sure we're heading in the right direction? I asked, anxiety clawing at me. The trees seemed to shift around us, the path growing more obscure with each step. I think so, Ben replied, doubt creeping into his voice as well. We stumbled forward, the air growing heavier, thick with an inexplicable energy that clung to our skin. The forest seemed to shift, branches creaking ominously, as if it were alive, a breathing entity aware of our presence. I felt a cold sweat trickle down my back, the sense of being watched returning tenfold. Then came another scream, this one closer, echoing through the trees like a desperate plea. My heart raced as I spun around, trying to pinpoint its source. We have to go back, I insisted, a primal fear gripping my throat. We can't just ignore that. Marco, we need to get out of here, Ben urged, his voice rising with panic. The fear between us was palpable, and I could feel the tension reaching its breaking point. You can't run away from this, Ben. We have to face it together. I felt desperation seep into my words, trying to reignite the adventurous spirit that had led us here. Together, he echoed, incredulous. You call this together? We're not even on the same page anymore. In that moment, everything seemed to unravel. The forest felt like it was closing in on us, shadows merging into one, embodying our fears. I could see Ben's resolve crumbling, the panic in his eyes a mirror to my own. I can't do this, he said, his voice breaking. I can't. Before I could respond, he turned and ran. The sound of his footsteps faded into the darkness, leaving me alone with the whispers and shadows, a chilling reminder that the forest had won this round. Alone in the suffocating darkness, I felt the weight of my fear pressing down on me like a lead blanket. Ben's retreating figure vanished into the shadows, leaving me with nothing but the eerie whispers and the overwhelming sense that something was very wrong. The forest seemed alive, a dark entity that thrived on our anxiety and fear. I stood frozen for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest as I fought to collect my thoughts. The fire, our source of comfort, was now nothing more than a memory, replaced by the oppressive silence of the woods. I could still hear the echoes of Ben's frantic footsteps fading away, and a wave of panic washed over me. Ben, I called out, my voice trembling. Come back. No answer. Just the chilling rustle of leaves and the distant cries that haunted my ears. I could feel a deep-seated fear clawing at my insides, urging me to flee, but a part of me knew I had to confront whatever awaited me in this darkness. As I took a hesitant step forward, the atmosphere shifted, thickening with an unsettling energy. Shadows danced around me, twisting and writhing just beyond the reach of my flashlight. I could feel the forest closing in, its branches stretching out like gnarled fingers, ready to ensnare me. The cries returned, closer now, more desperate. I gritted my teeth and forced myself to move, following the sound. Every instinct screamed for me to turn back, to run, but I pushed through, desperate to find Ben and face whatever lurked in the night. Ben! I shouted again, my voice echoing through the trees. Where are you? A cold breeze swept through the clearing, carrying with it a cacophony of whispers that filled the air. It was as if the very souls of the forest were trying to communicate, their sorrow wrapping around me like a shroud. I pressed on, heart racing, my flashlight beam trembling as I scanned the trees for any sign of my friend. Then, I spotted something, movement in the distance. A figure emerged from the shadows, a silhouette barely illuminated by my flashlight. My heart skipped a beat. Ben, I called, relief flooding through me. But as the figure stepped closer, I felt a wave of dread wash over me. It wasn't Ben. The shape was distorted, almost featureless, cloaked in darkness. The whispering intensified, echoing around us, and the air crackled with an unseen energy. Who are you? I demanded, fear twisting my voice. The figure paused, tilting its head as if considering my question. Help us, it said, its voice a chilling whisper that seemed to resonate from everywhere and nowhere at once. You must remember. A jolt of confusion shot through me. Remember what? I pressed, my pulse racing. But before I could grasp the full meaning of its words, the entity lunged forward, shadows swirling around it like a storm. Instinctively, I stumbled back, fear paralyzing me. The whispers turned into a cacophony of anguished cries, filling my mind with visions of despair and loss. I stumbled, trying to escape the onslaught of voices, but the shadows wrapped around me, pulling me deeper into their cold embrace. You shouldn't be here, I shouted, panic rising. But the figure only drew closer, its presence overwhelming. You are part of this now, it said, its tone filled with sorrow. You cannot escape. In that moment, I felt the weight of the forest's history pressing down on me. The pain, the loss, the spirits trapped within its depths. I realized that this wasn't just a haunting. It was a call to confront the darkness that lingered in both the forest and within myself. The shadows pressed in around me, and I felt the panic rising in my chest. The figure loomed closer, its whispers mingling with the cries of lost souls, creating a symphony of despair that threatened to drown me. I needed to escape, to find Ben, and to break free from the grip of this darkness. In a burst of adrenaline, I turned and ran, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the night as I retraced my steps. The forest felt alive with my fear, branches snapping in the wind and shadows flitting just out of reach. The cries followed me, echoing in my mind as I pushed forward, desperate to escape the clutches of whatever malevolent force had ensnared us. Ben, I shouted again, my voice hoarse and strained. Where are you? But only the forest responded, its silence growing oppressive. I stumbled over roots and rocks, the uneven ground threatening to trip me as I fought to escape the darkness that loomed behind. My heart raced, each beat echoing in my ears, drowning out the whispers that urged me to succumb. Just when I thought I was lost, a flicker of light appeared in the distance. I sprinted toward it, my legs burning with exertion, and as I drew closer, I realized it was the glow of our campfire, still burning, still alive. Relief washed over me, fueling my determination to escape. As I burst into the clearing, the warmth of the fire wrapped around me like a comforting embrace. But the shadows were not far behind, creeping at the edges of the light, their whispers still clawing at my mind. Ben, I yelled, my voice breaking as I scanned the area frantically. Please, where are you? Just then, I saw a figure step from the trees. Ben. He emerged, eyes wide with fear, his flashlight flickering in the dim light. Marco, he cried, relief flooding his voice. I thought I lost you. Thank God you're okay. I rushed to him, the bond of our friendship reigniting the flicker of hope in my chest. We need to leave. Now, what happened? Ben asked, glancing over his shoulder at the shadows creeping closer. I heard you screaming. I saw something. Some kind of spirit, I said, breathless. It wanted us to remember. I don't know what it meant, but we can't stay here any longer. Ben nodded, urgency driving his movements. Let's get out of here before it's too late. As we gathered our belongings, I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows were closing in, whispering in tones that filled my mind with dread. I grabbed Ben's arm, and together we raced down the path, the echoes of the forest pursuing us, their cries blending with our footsteps. The darkness began to lift as the first light of dawn broke through the trees. The whispers faded, replaced by the soft sounds of morning, a stark contrast to the night's terror. I could feel the chill of the forest slowly receding, but the memory of the darkness clung to me like a shadow. When we finally reached the edge of the forest, we paused to catch our breath, the sunlight spilling over us like a warm blanket. "We made it," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of relief and lingering fear. "Yeah," Ben replied, looking back at the trees that loomed behind us. "But what was that? What did we experience?" "I don't know," I admitted, a shiver running down my spine. "But I feel like we'll never truly escape its grasp. It's like we're connected to whatever happened here." We stood in silence, the morning light washing over us, but the shadows of the forest remained in the corners of my mind. I realized that while we had escaped physically, the haunting memories would linger, a reminder of the thin line between reality and the unknown. With a deep breath, I took one last look at the forest, its secrets now woven into the fabric of our experience. "Let's go home," I said, determination settling in. Together. As we turned to leave, the sun rose higher, casting long shadows behind us but illuminating the path ahead. We walked away from the darkness, carrying the weight of our experience, knowing that the forest would forever hold a piece of us, a whisper of its secrets echoing in our hearts. We've reached the end. Which of these stories did you find most intriguing? Comment below. Thank you and see you later.